Welcome, everybody, to our continuing series where we're talking to writers and columnists, people who work for the media, in addition to professors and academics, to try to get a well-rounded perspective from both the left and the right on what's going on in America today. Unbiased, no agenda, just want you to be informed. With us today is Gordon L. Weil. He is a Ph.D., although fleetingly so. He has written two articles that we're interested in today. America has a crisis of confidence and a dangerous proposal for national divorce. Gordon L. Weil has been active in politics, journalism, publishing, and energy consulting. A graduate of Bowdoin College, he has a master's degree from the College of Europe in Belgium and a Ph.D. from Columbia. He's an Army veteran. He was a top aide to U.S. Senator George McGovern during his presidential run. That's impressive. In Maine, he served as Commissioner of Business Regulation Director of the Office of Energy Resources and the state's first public advocate. He was a Harpswell selectman. He led the negotiation that created the Unified New England Power Grid and chaired the National Organization of State Energy Agencies. He has reported for the Washington Post, Newsweek, London's Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, WNet New York. His weekly commentary has appeared in Maine newspapers since 2008, and he has written or edited 16 books. Chairman of the Standard Energy Company in Augusta, Maine, graduated from Bowdoin, a member of Phi Beta Kappa, commissioner of the Business Regulation. He has served on numerous regional energy bodies and was chair of the National Organization of State Energy Agencies. He was the chair of the New England negotiators leading the region's electric transmission tariff and the independent system operator. He has taught at several colleges and universities and is the author of 12 books. He was a local elected official, and he's bilingual in English and French. Formerly wrote for the Washington Post and other newspapers, and has served on the U.S. Senate and EU staffs, headed Maine state agencies, as well as a Harpswell selectman. Columnist Weil, did I get anything wrong with your bio?
No, that's great. Perfectly fine.
Okay. Well, today what we wanted to talk to you about was this article, Dangerous Proposal for National Divorce. Former GOP Rep Liz Cheney says the proposal amounts to a call for secession from the U.S., but national divorce is neither legal nor possible in this law-abiding country. That's what the Civil War settled. So Green, a white ring extremist, is really proposing the impossible. For the system to work requires both sides to be willing to compromise. In some communities and in some states that was possible. But in Washington, the sides hardened. Compromise has become so rare that what should have been common in practice became a rare achievement. Members seldom negotiate, they often bloviate. Utah's GOP Governor Spencer Cox says in answer to Green, "We don't need national divorce. We need marriage counseling." Why did you write this article? And why did you write it now? This is the question I always ask people when I'm talking to people who've written articles on national divorce. What were you seeing? You're an American. You have eyes. What were you seeing? Why did you feel this was a good article to write at this point? What's going on in America? Why did you feel this was a correct response to that?
First, let me thank you for inviting me for this interview. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the column. The reason why I wrote it is I'm well aware, as I think most people are, of the divisiveness that exists in the country, that, if anything, is becoming more and more solid, with less middle ground. Some people say they're moderates, and I don't take that too seriously. I think people are generally lined up on one side or the other, and it's about even in the country now, and we can see that how it manifests itself in Congress and in elective offices all over the country. In a way, it manifests itself even in Maine, although all four members of the congressional delegation in Maine, 2 senators, 2 representatives, caucus with the Democrats. One of them, the House members, runs in a district that has been carried by Trump both times. So his winning is exceptional and somewhat a tribute to his skill. But this divisiveness exists everywhere. This division exists everywhere. And I thought that the statement by Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of had caught public attention by calling for a national divorce, essentially say the differences between the two sides are irreconcilable, and we ought to find some way to just part company on to as great an extent as we can. I think that's a reasonable question to raise. I don't agree with what her obvious motives are in raising it, but I think the issue is that it raises is, can this country function over time with a deep divide about equal between the two sides, where we have historically depended upon compromise, where neither side would get its way or everything it wanted. The party in power would get more than the party that wasn't, but there was always an agreement made between parties, between sides, so that we could make some kind of decision. When the breach is so strong and so deep, the question arises, can we find a way to make decisions? I think we're experiencing that at this very moment on the national debt ceiling issue. And I think her quote, her remark, brought that into pretty sharp relief. I think she's got an agenda, but the point is nonetheless worth addressing.
So I'm pleased and a little bit surprised to hear that. Let me ask you a question. When she made this comment, we need a national divorce. We're so polarized. We can't get along. It sounds like you're saying, yeah, there's something to that. Maybe she's not the greatest spokesperson. Maybe she didn't have the greatest plan, but she's not talking fluff. There really is a division problem in America.
I think there's no question there's a division problem. I don't think a divorce per se, along the line she recommends, could work or would work, or is in a stable solution. I mean, it's not something that could hold up. Aside from what Liz Cheney said, it verges on a breakup. Divorce is that's what a divorce is, and divorce is Green's term, not mine.
Sure.
But is there a deep divide that is almost irreconcilable? Yes, I think that's true. I think she's picked up on that. I think we all recognize it. I think Cheney herself was involved in that, was affected by that. So I think it's a real question. And I think we need to look at ways to make the system, the American political system, originally based on compromise, how can we make the system work given the divisiveness that exists in the country?
One of the things I noticed that I thought was bizarre was that Marjorie Taylor Greene comes out and she says on President's Day, we need a national divorce. Within 12 hours, I saw multiple liberal stations and multiple conservative news stations all have the exact same message, which I thought was weird because these people supposedly don't talk to each other. Within 12 hours, they had the same message, and it went something like this. Oh, Marjorie, you're so silly. There's no division. We don't know what you're talking about. Americans basically get along, and it's people like you who caused the division, and you're making this up because you want division and you want to grow your ratings. And so you're making a thing up which doesn't really exist. The Young Turks said that. Breaking Point said that. Stephen Colbert on the Nightly News said that. Jack Probasek on the right wing said that. I even saw Jack Probasek, who's on the right wing, reference MSNBC and say good reporting. I mean, it was as bizarre as possible. Why did basically most of the news not acknowledge what you're willing to acknowledge? There is an actual problem. She's not lying. There's something here. Maybe she's not the best spokesperson. Maybe her plan doesn't work. Why did we see so many news agencies forget their earlier reporting 3 months, 6 months, 18 months before, where they covered political division, not mention any of that and say, well, basically it doesn't exist. Why did that happen?
Oh, I would think it's confusing the messenger with the message. I think she's not a very credible player in Congress or in American public life for a number of reasons that aren't really relevant to this discussion. Uh,
Sure.
but and so there's a tendency to dismiss what she says because of who she is. I try not to do that in what I write. I try to look at is there an issue here? Is there um, a matter that deserves addressing, if not in the way she would address it? So I think it's easy to take a shot at something she proposes because of some of the other things she said and done. And I think that's
Space
unfortunate.
lasers.
There's also a bit of an overdose of mythology about common values and common this and common that we all share. I hope we all love this country. It certainly is a great country, and it's done some incredible things, and I hope we'll continue to do so in this country and in the world. But having said that, we have problems. You know, this is a country run by human beings. Human beings are not perfect.
Sure.
And so we make mistakes. We do things wrong. We have to admit error. We have to back off and say, okay, how can we do this better? And a lot of this taking refuge in the statement, well, we all share these common values, doesn't really mean very much. It doesn't solve the problem. I think it's meant almost as a sedative. You know, take common values and call me in the morning, you'll feel better. I think it's fine, and I hope there are common values, but it's not enough to solve the practical problems that exist in division. I do believe both sides are sincere, and I don't see that on the extremes of either side, an agreement with that statement. I believe that both sides believe what they are saying is good for the country.
Sure.
It's quite different what they're saying. At the extremes, that turns into demonizing the people on the other side. That the Republican right tends to demonize Democrats and wokeism and all of that, and the progressive part of the Democratic Party seems to adopt a sense of self-righteousness. How could anybody disagree with us? We're so right.
You said it.
I don't think either of these views is particularly constructive.
I have a few more questions I want to ask. I don't want to get bogged down to it, but I do want to say, I think it's interesting to hold yourself up as a news agency and say, we give you the straight story, and we're not afraid to tell you this, what the truth is. And we'll go to those awkward places and we'll report stuff that the others won't do it. And then when it comes time, you're like, ooh, Marjorie Taylor Greene, gross. I'm not going to admit the stuff that I know is to be true. How are you bold and independent and free and willing to go to the awkward places if you're not willing to do that?
Well, I think it's cultural. I think right now we have very little of what we would call an independent make up your mind by each issue as it comes along. All publications, all television programs reflect some bias. And that was perhaps always true, but it's become more acceptable, and the line between commentary and news reporting is definitely blurred. There are very few places that I can go where I can read a story, a news report that is actually a news report rather than instant analysis of something before you even tell me what it is. And so I try not to do that.
He said it, folks. I didn't say it. He said it. He has years in the field. He's saying what I think a lot of us suspect, but I can't say that. You're the guy that has experience. But I suspect
it's changed. It's changed in my experience over time. It was much more the case decades ago, where the editors edited, which they don't do much anymore, and the editors insisted that you not show bias in what you wrote, that you try to be comprehensive. And that's not a he said, she said kind of just give me quotes from both sides and that's unbiased. It really was what happened, what really happened here. Just give me the information. The opinion about whether that's whether I agree with it or disagree with it, or people ought to be worried or happy, occurs somewhere else in the newspaper or somewhere else on TV. Sure, nobody can totally eliminate bias from themselves. It's inhuman. It just can't be done. But you got to make an effort. You got to try to do that, and that almost is gone now.
When did you notice that change from the traditional form of let's try to not be biased to what you're talking about now? Was that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
I would say more in the 20 to 30 years ago range.
So somewhere around the 1990s.
It's been gradually coming all along. I think that Reagan, who was a controversial president, to say the least, nonetheless existed at a time where there was still at least a considerable degree of objective reporting on both sides. I think really after that, it became increasingly partisan.
Around the 1990s. That's interesting. Oh, let me ask you this question. I have asked many people about the Utah governor saying we don't need a national divorce. Maybe we are super polarized. You're admitting there's a problem. It's significant. What does marriage counseling look like for 300 million people who are this polarized? And who can pull that off, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's a cute phrase. One shouldn't take that any more seriously than national divorce, but it was a nice answer. But I think who can pull that off needs to be leaders. And leaders are people who are willing to take bold positions, even if they're unpopular and if they lose elections. And we have very few people like that in public life. Leaders need to be willing to make concessions to the other side, need to be willing to deal with the other side and to lay down a compromise and say, look, this is how I've come to you. What are you doing to come to me? And we don't have that. We haven't had that kind of leadership for quite a while. And that's lacking. The people in Congress cling to their jobs too long. The average member of Congress in the 19th century served in the House 3 terms, 6 years. Abraham Lincoln served 1 term because he took a principal position, knew he'd be defeated, and didn't bother running again. Got to be president after that, so it wasn't too bad a move. But we don't have people in Congress like that for the most part now. They just want to get reelected. We have a senator in Maine who said she was going to run for reelection once. She's now in her 5th term. That's just not right. And for an old guy, I'll tell you, everybody's too old.
Why? You said it. You said it. I'm here in California where we're dealing with Dianne Feinstein,
yes,
who doesn't even remember she already said she's retiring and is insisting.
That's clearly wrong. I mean, she stayed too long. I can't make that too clear. It's unfair to the whole population, and certainly unfair to the younger, whatever, 2/3 of the population, who have a different experience, a different language, a different culture from old people. And it's their country. They deserve to be represented. And it's not happening.
You heard it. You heard it. So I think what I'm hearing from you is we don't have any political leaders on the left or the right who are known and have some credibility and some following who have what it takes to really bridge the divide and bring everybody together.
If we have them, they're not doing it.
That's good.
I would have thought. I'll give you a
Right there. That
suggestion.
was the answer.
I would have thought.
Nice answer.
I think that Joe Biden's first term in office would enable him to leave the presidency in pretty good shape for the only thing that comes after being president, which is history. That he would have come out well in history. And I thought he knew that. I thought he knew that he would be a one-term president. We have had a one-term president in our history who is totally forgotten, but who has done huge things for this country and only served one term, and that's James Polk. I don't agree even with everything he did, even from this perspective of history, but he surely did what he said he was going to do and then left. If Biden had used the last part of his presidency not to be running for re-election, but to take the platform he had built for himself and use that to be the leader, because he wouldn't care about being reelected. It would no longer be a matter of being reelected. I think he had the potential, because he certainly has a personality that puts people at ease. And that's good. And he didn't do that, obviously, and I'm disappointed that he didn't do that, because he could have accomplished more in one term than he might, if he's reelected, be able to accomplish in two terms. Quit while you're ahead is a great idea.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'd ask people about marriage counseling and who it is, and I find everyone repeated this phrase. When Marjorie was talking about national divorce, oh, you're an idiot. We don't need that. We need marriage counseling. I saw many people repeat that, politicians, lawyers, media people. Not one person defined it. They just repeated it and then moved on. And I'm like, what the hell does that look like? And especially when I remember Joe Biden said, I'm going to be the soul of America. I'm decent America. I'm going to return. I'm going to heal us. I'm going to bring it all together. There will be, quote, a national calming after I'm elected. That's what he said. And he's going to bring the conservatives in. And that was all before January 6th happened. So
January 6th was a catastrophe, in my view. Didn't help. But it is exactly after January 6th where the leader has to emerge and say, elections don't matter. The country matters. I'm going to make my focus from now on what I can do to heal the divide and get this thing working again properly and not worry about re-election. That would have had a huge impact at that time. But it doesn't happen. It just isn't happening. But you asked me, what's marriage counseling? I don't know. There isn't any such thing. That you can't carry that simile too far, but or metaphor. But I think that what's missing is leadership, and you said, who's the marriage counselor? It's the national leader, and I think Biden had the chance to be the national leader, and I think that is dissipated with his focus on being reelected. And so that becomes the purpose. I know anybody who holds elective office has a desire to run for reelection, which a lot of people overlook. And that is, they want to know, did I get a good report card? What do the people think of what I've done? And so reelection is a self-validation in a way. You've got to go past that. You've got to say there are things bigger than my feeling whether I was approved or not. And these approval ratings and popularity ratings are ridiculous. They can be changed by action. And what we need is action. And we're not getting it from anybody. I think that's regrettable. I do think, however, to talk about this week's column, not yet out, that something is happening in the country that may, over time, not immediately, but not over decades, over a few years, bring about a change. And this is inevitably unpopular with one side of the divide, but I think it's happening. And if you'd like, I'll go into that.
What? Yeah. What is that one change?
The change is demographics. And most people would think, oh yeah, women, young people, minorities, whatever. No, I don't mean any of that. But I mean people voting with their feet. There's a lot of attention being paid to the migration of people away from Democratic states to Republican states. The governor of Florida will tell us he's raking in people from California. That's a perfectly good metaphor for this belief that people are migrating. And if you're in the receiving state and you're the governor of receiving state, you say, because they agree with me, they agree with my politics. They're coming here because we've done things that are so attractive that they want to abandon that bad old Northern Democratic liberal state and come to a Southern or Western Republican conservative state. I think that's wrong. And I think that's the change of what's happening. There's an old political saying, which I think is still true. I think this is happening. I think the migration is happening. That's an objective fact. You can,
it is.
Census Bureau counts people. If you believe they count halfway decently, then people are moving. There's no question about that. But I don't think they're moving because of the attractiveness of the politics where they're going, or because of the unattractiveness of the politics where they're leaving. I don't know for sure why they're doing it. There's a whole lot of reasons: jobs, weather, big factor for somebody from Maine to tell you that. And so they're moving. And there's an old political saying is that when people from the north move to the south, both areas become more liberal.
Yes, I've seen that.
See, and I think that may be. I'm not saying I know this for a certainty, but I think that may be what's happening, and I write about that in some detail this week to do some analysis and looking at what's really happening. If you look, for example, and I mentioned it, the three big cities in the U.S. that are growing the fastest all have Democratic mayors, even though they're in Republican states. And so people are moving to cities. They're not moving to, when people move to Georgia from the north, and Georgia's a good case study, they move to the Atlanta area. They don't move to the red areas of Georgia. They move to Atlanta. And so I think a change is happening. And I guess maybe the answer is not a national divorce, but more interbreeding. As people, are thrown together more in states that become purple, the ideal country would be one where all states were purple.
Fair enough, but that's not what the data is showing. So when we look at the big sort and we look at the census data, they're showing since the 1990s that you're getting more hardcore red and hardcore blue counties. So it used to be.
Yeah, and do you know that Biden carried counties that had 67 million more people in them than Trump carried?
Sure. Yes.
By county, but they're all in California or New York.
Exactly.
So as people from California or New York go to Texas or Georgia, California and New York will remain Democratic states, and Texas and Georgia will be more influenced than they have been by the people coming in.
True, but we're using the word purple to talk about Texas and Georgia, but
they're not there yet. But although Georgia certainly managed to elect both Republicans and Democrats to key positions.
True. True. The Democrats barely won, though, as I report when people go, Georgia's
Well,
Brooklyn
barely won
Democratic.
is barely won.
True.
For people who lose elections and claim they won, barely won is the real thing.
Yeah, but they said there was a massive push against Trump and a massive demographic shift, and it resulted in 2% over half. That's not massive.
I don't think there is a mass of anything happening, and a purple state is one that's pretty evenly divided. I don't believe, I want to make it very clear, I don't believe that either party should permanently dominate. I don't think that's
Sure.
good for the country. I
Sure.
think it's bad for the country. I think it's good to have shifting back and forth and compromises that have to be made in order to advance. And the party that's in control at any one time or in any one state or in Congress or the presidency gets the final call. But I think that should change. We shouldn't have a permanent control by either point of view. I think power corrupts, and I think that's the path to power corrupting.
We're winding down, but I want to ask you, if division is real, and if the NPR has been documenting and the Big Sort, the book, has been true, what they're saying is for the last 30 years, we're sorting ourselves out. Whether we're doing it intentionally or not, it's ambiguous. But we used to have counties that were competitive. You could be Republican or Democrat. Those are represented in gray in the top left corner. And we had a few counties that don't even run if you're a Democrat, don't even run if you're a Republican. But there was 50% of the counties were competitive, gray in the map. We've gone down to where they're almost totally wiped out. And that's over a 30-year period. That's not a fluke. It wasn't gerrymandering. This started 10 years before gerrymandering. This started 10 years before social media. It's been a consistent pattern. People are becoming more and more hardcore into separate groups. If we're not going to do national divorce and we don't know how to do marriage counseling, how do we fix this problem before we get 2 or 3 more January 6th?
I don't know. I don't have the answer of how we fix it unless there is the kind of leadership, as I said, that is able to bring people to the table without worrying about the risk of doing it. But
Right.
what's wrong with these maps that you've put up is very apparent to me just looking at the state of Maine. Look at Maine. In everything except the last one, the bottom one, Maine is not shown as being one way or the other.
True.
Fortunately, geography makes it easy to pick out Maine.
True.
And then suddenly the bottom one, oh, it's all red. If
It's mostly red. You're right. Maine is still one of the gray areas. The Central Valley of California, where I'm at, is still a gray area.
and Maine, in fact, can elect Republicans or Democrats. In fact,
Sure.
the only Republican member of Congress from New England is from Maine, member of the House or Senate. And the margins here are not so substantial that they can't be reversed. But
Okay.
a lot depends on the candidate.
Fair.
And so Maine is not a state that is either color, even though everybody is a Democrat right now. If you look at the margins, they're not that big. They could change. They have an appeal on both sides, particularly if neither side is too extreme. The extremes is what kills them. And I think that can be done all over the country. I think that actually does happen all over the country. And these maps are in many respects misleading. I can't see it in detail, but Houston, which is, I think, the 4th largest city in the United States, is Democratic. And I don't think we see that in this map, yet that's pretty significant. Austin, one of the 3 largest cities in the country that is now Democratic. Those are 2 big cities in Texas, a state that we think is solidly Republican. Cruz didn't win last time by that big a margin. He's got to worry about his reelection. It's not a guarantee. I think these maps are misleading in a way and do not contradict what I'm saying about the movement of voters. Now, I'm not saying I know for sure this is happening, that the result is going to transform the map. But if there is anything going on that could do that, it could be the migration from the north to the south, to the cities of the south.
We're going to have to leave it there. We have another interview at 12:40. Where can people find out more about you? Where would you like them to see where you rate? If you'd like to have more conversations, is there a website you'd like to recommend?
Well, certainly I am on Substack as well as in newspapers in Maine. If you just put in Substack and my name, you'll get my site, which is called Notes from a Corner of the Country. And that's free. So the newspapers you have to pay. The Substack is free, and I intend to keep it that way. So if anybody would like to see what else I'm talking about, I certainly hope they'll take a look at that Substack website.
We're sorry we got to go. We'll hope we'll have you back. Thank you for being here, and I will email you a copy of this video in a few hours, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity and wish you well.
I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.